6:47 a.m. I'm in boxers and yesterday's t-shirt, watering my retirement tomatoes with a frog-shaped can, when two squad cars screech up like I'm public enemy number one. "Sir, step away from the fence. We've got reports of threatening signage and harassment." My weapon? A 6-inch private property, no trespassing sign I nailed to my own damn post. The cop glances at the frog can, then the tiny sign, then his partner. Like all three of us know this is the dumbest call of the year. What nobody knew yet, not even me, by Christmas the HOA president who called them would be in an orange jumpsuit, facing 17 felonies for stealing 50 grand from every single one of us. What would you do if the person robbing you blind was the same one sending cops to your door over a 6-inch sign? Drop your craziest HOA or neighbor story below. Where are you watching from? 3 years ago, Linda and I thought we'd escaped the rat race when we bought 1247 Oak Ridge Drive in Maplewood Estates, Texas. I'm Garrett Thornfield, 52, just sold my electrical contracting business after 3 decades of crawling through attics and fixing other people's problems. Time to fix my own life instead. Our corner lot was perfect. Space for the woodworking shop I'd dreamed about since I was 20, and Linda's herb garden where she planned to grow enough basil to supply half the neighborhood. No mortgage, no boss, no drama. Just peaceful retirement in suburbia's safest embrace. Maplewood Estates, 127 homes, $245 monthly dues, manicured everything. The HOA promised community standards enforcement and property value protection. Sounded reasonable. What could go wrong? Enter Patricia Patty Kellerman. Picture a woman who investigates insurance fraud for a living, naturally suspicious, obsessively detail-oriented, with zero tolerance for anything she can't control. 48 years old, lives in the neighborhood's biggest house, and treats our community like her personal fiefdom. Patty carried a clipboard everywhere. Grocery store, block parties, walking her neurotic Pomeranian named Princess. She photographed violations like a forensics investigator. Trash cans visible past 6 p.m., holiday decorations up one day too long, grass clippings on sidewalks. For 2 blissful years, we flew under her radar. Then the teenagers discovered our corner lot. Every school day at 3:15, stampede. 8 to 10 kids cutting through Linda's carefully designed herb spiral, trampling her thyme and rosemary, leaving energy drink cans scattered like shrapnel across our lawn. The sweet scent of crushed lavender mixed with the metallic tang of aluminum cans became our daily reminder that paradise had termites. I tried diplomacy first. "Hey guys, mind using the sidewalk? We've got some delicate plants here." They stared at me like I'd suggested they walk backwards to Mars. The destruction escalated. Linda's herb spiral, 6 months of planning arranged in a perfect Fibonacci pattern, looked like a battlefield after each teenage invasion. When one kid launched his Monster Energy can at my workshop window, I'd had enough. Time for boundaries. I installed a sign, 6 inches by 4 inches, white plastic with black letters, "Private property, no trespassing." Screwed it into my own fence post, on my own land, facing my own property. Seemed reasonable. Big mistake. Next morning, I'm savoring coffee on my back porch when Patty materializes at my fence line like some bureaucratic ghost. Clipboard in hand, measuring tape deployed, she's examining my sign with the intensity of a bomb disposal expert. "Garrett." Her voice could freeze July in Texas. "This unauthorized signage violates Section 4.3 of our community covenants regarding external modifications." I set down my mug, ceramic warm against my palm. "Patty, I read every page of those covenants. There's no sign restriction." Click, click, click went her ballpoint pen, the sound echoing across the morning stillness. "The Architectural Review Committee requires pre-approval for any external additions that impact community aesthetics." Architectural Review Committee? For a 6-inch sign? Her smile belonged in a documentary about apex predators. "The community won't tolerate eyesores that threaten property values, Garrett. I'll be contacting you about proper removal procedures." She stalked away on designer heels, leaving me standing there with the distinct feeling I'd just been marked for extermination by someone with way too much time and a dangerous amount of petty power. The morning breeze carried Mrs. Patterson's bacon frying next door, mixed with the distant rumble of the garbage truck. Normal suburban sounds that somehow felt like a funeral dirge. What I didn't know yet, this wasn't about a sign. This was about a woman who'd been stealing from our community for years, and I'd just become her biggest threat. Friday morning brought my first taste of bureaucratic warfare, a certified letter thick enough to stop a bullet, stamped with the Maplewood Estates HOA seal like some official death warrant. Notice of covenant violation, unauthorized external modification, sign installation without architectural review, committee approval. My coffee went cold as I read the legal gibberish demanding immediate removal of my non-compliant signage or face a $500 fine within 72 hours. The letter cited Aesthetic Standards Addendum Section 12.4 governing external modifications. Problem was, I'd read our HOA covenants like a technical manual. 30 years as an electrician teaches you that every wire, every code, every regulation matters. There was no Section 12.4 anywhere. Linda, where's that box of HOA papers from closing? 20 minutes later, our dining room table looked like a law office exploded. Original covenants, amendments, architectural guidelines, every bureaucratic scrap from our house purchase spread across Linda's good tablecloth. The musty smell of old paper mixed with fresh coffee while we hunted through 3 years of fine print. Nothing. Zero mention of sign restrictions. Honey, Linda said, waving the original 1987 covenant document, this thing regulates satellite dishes and swimming pools, but not one word about signs. That familiar electrician instinct kicked in. When something doesn't make sense, trace it back to the source. Monday morning found me at Collin County Courthouse, an imposing brick monument that smelled like floor wax and faded justice. The HOA records clerk was Dolores, a sweet woman who'd been filing community documents since disco was popular. Her fingernails clicked against keyboard keys as she pulled our file. HOA amendments require 75% homeowner approval plus county filing, she explained with practiced efficiency. Let's see what Maplewood's filed since 1987. I held my breath, hoping I wasn't crazy. Original covenants, 3 landscaping contract amendments, and that's it. No aesthetic standards anything. What about voting records? Honey, if amendments passed, I'd have voting tallies right here. You can't just invent new rules. State law requires proper procedures. Vindication tastes like victory, but what came next tasted like something much more interesting. While Dolores searched, I noticed Patty's signature on several recent documents as Community Standards Consulting LLC providing architectural review services to our HOA. My electrician brain started connecting circuits. Can you check your business registry for Community Standards Consulting LLC? Her fingers danced across keys. No such business registered in Texas. Whoever's using that name is operating illegally. The pieces clicked together like a perfect wire connection. Patty wasn't just making up rules. She was running a fake business to do it. That evening's emergency board meeting felt like amateur theater. 3 elderly board members sat around the community center's scratched conference table looking like they'd rather be watching Jeopardy! Patty handles all the compliance technical stuff, stammered Johnson, our treasurer, adjusting glasses thick as Coke bottles. We assumed she knew what she was doing. You assumed she could invent sections that don't exist? Patty burst through the door like she was raiding a meth lab, designer handbag clutched like body armor. Garrett, your aggressive behavior is exactly why we need stronger enforcement. Aggressive behavior? I researched actual HOA law. The Architectural Review Committee has emergency authority during property value threats. What committee? Show me the authorization. Her ballpoint pen clicked machine gun rapid. Some situations require immediate community protection. Your hostile signage encourages confrontational behavior toward families. I stared at this woman who'd just shapeshifted from fake legal expert to concerned neighbor in 15 seconds. The conference room's buzzing fluorescents cast harsh shadows while board members squirmed like kids watching their parents fight. Patty, you're billing our HOA using a fake company name. That's fraud. I provide professional consulting services to protect community standards. Professional services for a business that doesn't exist? Her face went red as a stop sign, but she doubled down instead of backing down. I'll be filing safety complaints with city planning about your sightline obstructions creating traffic hazards. She stormed out, heels machine gunning the hallway tiles, leaving 3 elderly men looking like they'd witnessed a crime but couldn't decide which one. Maybe just remove the sign, Johnson suggested weakly. Keep things peaceful? Peaceful? She's threatening $500 fines based on rules she invented while potentially defrauding our community association. Walking to my truck, evening barbecue smoke drifted across the parking lot. Normal suburban smells that felt increasingly precious as I realized I'd just gone to war with someone who played by no rules except her own. Back home, Linda was waiting with a fresh pot of coffee and a question I wasn't ready to answer. So, what's our next move? I didn't know yet, but something told me Patty's fake business was just the tip of a very ugly iceberg. Tuesday morning, my phone became a weapon of mass bureaucracy. 7 a.m., City Code Enforcement. 8:15, Fire Marshal. 9:30, Zoning Department. Patty had apparently spent her weekend speed dialing every municipal office in Texas. Mr. Thornfield? Inspector Martinez, Code Enforcement. Got a complaint about traffic safety hazards from residential signage. I'm standing in boxers and yesterday's coffee-stained shirt staring through my kitchen window at the 6-inch piece of plastic that was apparently threatening public safety. Traffic hazards from a no trespassing sign? Complainant claims sightline obstruction at corner intersection creates accident risk. Our dangerous intersection was where Oak Ridge met Elm Street, the kind of sleepy residential corner where Mrs. Patterson's overweight tabby cat was the biggest traffic concern. But Inspector Martinez had to investigate, no matter how insane the complaint. 20 minutes later, he's out there with professional sightline equipment while I watched from my porch, morning coffee growing bitter in my mouth. Sir, Martinez said, shaking his head as he packed up, your sign's totally compliant. Whoever called this in either doesn't understand basic traffic engineering or has some serious personal issues. Personal issues. That nailed it. The fire marshal arrived at noon to investigate fire safety concerns related to my combustible installation. I watched through my workshop window as this poor guy examined my plastic sign with the expression of a man questioning every life choice that led to this moment. 23 years on the job, he muttered, and this is officially the stupidest fire call I've ever responded to. That evening, Linda made the suggestion that probably saved our sanity. Honey, start recording everything, photos, times, witnesses. Smart woman. My electrical background had taught me the value of documentation. Every wire, every connection, every safety inspection gets recorded. I installed discrete security cameras around our property perimeter, high-definition motion-activated systems I'd learned to wire during commercial jobs. The cameras paid off faster than a lottery ticket. Wednesday night, 11:47 p.m. According to the timestamp, motion sensors lit up like Christmas as someone crept across my front yard. Night vision footage showed Patty Kellerman with a flashlight and measuring tape, trespassing on my property to investigate my trespassing sign. The irony was so thick you could pour it on pancakes. She spent 23 minutes examining my fence line, taking flash photos, measuring distances from my sign to the street. Every criminal step captured in courtroom-quality digital evidence. But the real breakthrough came Thursday when my public information requests started paying off. Patty hadn't just targeted me. This woman was running a neighborhood-wide harassment campaign. Mrs. Patterson threatened with $300 fines for excessive bird feeders attracting pest wildlife. The Martinez family on Elm Street, enforcement action over their kids' sidewalk chalk art. The Johnsons, cited for unauthorized garden modifications when they planted tomatoes. Then my electrician brain remembered something from a commercial job years ago, selective enforcement doctrine. If authorities ignore identical violations while prosecuting others, they lose legal standing to enforce anything. Basic equal protection under law. I spent Friday afternoon photographing every covenant violation in Maplewood Estates. What I discovered would make any civil rights lawyer break into song. Patty's own property violated multiple covenants: decorative fence exceeding height limits, unauthorized landscape lighting, storage shed violating setback requirements. Her immediate neighbors had identical or worse violations than anything she'd complained about. But here's the kicker. While measuring her illegal fence height, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Patty was watching me from her front window, taking photos of me photographing her violations. The woman was documenting my documentation. That evening's coffee meeting in my workshop drew 7 neighbors who'd been targeted by Patty's enforcement reign of terror. The smell of sawdust mixed with frustrated voices sharing war stories. She cited us for Christmas lights being up January 2nd, said Tom Martinez. Then her lights stayed up until Easter. The bird feeder harassment went on for months, Mrs. Patterson added, hands trembling slightly. 30 years I've fed birds. Suddenly, I'm a public menace. But Sarah Bellamy dropped the bombshell that changed everything. My husband works in city planning. He says they're tracking which neighborhoods generate the most frivolous complaints. Apparently, one person has filed 47 separate reports from our community in 6 months. 47 reports. One person. The city's considering harassment charges against repeat filers who waste municipal resources, Sarah continued. They're building a case. Walking back to my house that night, the evening air carried the scent of barbecue smoke and freshly cut grass, normal suburban smells that felt increasingly precious as I realized we weren't just fighting one crazy neighbor. We were fighting someone who'd weaponized the entire municipal government against her own community. Monday morning, I called the police non-emergency line. I'd like to report criminal trespassing captured on my security system. Officer Reynolds showed up Monday morning while I was replacing a motion sensor that had mysteriously stopped working, probably from overuse documenting Patty's midnight property tours. Mr. Thornfield, you reported trespassing? We spent 20 minutes reviewing security footage on my kitchen laptop, Reynolds taking notes like he was investigating actual crime instead of suburban psychosis. This is textbook trespassing, he said, watching Patty measure my fence for the 4th time in a week. Want to press charges? Document it first. Build the case properly. He nodded with the approval of someone who'd seen enough neighborhood wars to know how they escalate. Smart thinking. What blindsided me was the phone call 6 hours later. Mr. Thornfield, this is Sergeant Davis. We need to discuss Mrs. Kellerman's complaint against you. My coffee mug stopped halfway to my mouth. Her complaint against me? She reports that you threatened her during a confrontation and have been conducting surveillance of her property with intent to intimidate. I actually snorted coffee through my nose. Sergeant, I have footage of her trespassing on my property multiple times this week. Bring that footage tomorrow morning, both sides of every story. Tuesday at the police station felt like being summoned to the principal's office by someone who carried handcuffs instead of hall passes. The building smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner that couldn't quite mask the scent of human desperation. Sergeant Davis reviewed my security footage with the weary patience of someone who'd mediated neighbor disputes since before the internet made everyone an expert on everything. Mr. Thornfield, 30 years of this job teaches you to recognize patterns. Someone filing multiple complaints hoping one sticks. His chair squeaked like old hinges as he leaned back. Problem is, filing false police reports is a felony. What exactly did she claim I did? Said you approached her property in an aggressive and intimidating manner while she was conducting legitimate safety assessments for community protection. But here's where things got interesting and terrifying. She also identified herself as HOA legal counsel when filing the report, Davis continued, pointing at his computer screen. Every circuit in my electrician brain fired at once. Legal counsel? She investigates insurance fraud. She's not a lawyer. Exactly. Misrepresenting legal authority to law enforcement is a felony in Texas. Makes every statement she's given us potentially fraudulent. Wednesday morning, I discovered someone had done a number on my decorative fence post overnight. The post supporting my infamous sign was cracked and listing like a drunk sailor, clearly damaged by something heavy-duty. I was examining the damage when Patty materialized at my front door like a bureaucratic grim reaper, clipboard clutched like a shield. Garrett, I'm filing a vandalism report. Someone damaged community property in obvious retaliation for legitimate compliance enforcement. Community property? That's my fence post on my land. The post borders community easement areas. The timing suggests escalatory behavior following recent enforcement actions. I stared at this woman who just accused me of vandalizing my own property to prove some twisted point about suburban authority. The morning air carried the scent of someone's bacon cooking, a normal smell that felt increasingly surreal in our parallel universe of HOA insanity. But Linda's cameras had captured something Patty didn't know about, her landscaping crew working near our fence at 2:17 a.m. with power equipment. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson called with information that made everything click. Garrett, dear, I couldn't sleep last night. Saw Patty's crew out there with some kind of electric trimmer, working right near your corner. My electrician instincts fired like live wires touching metal. Patty had staged property damage to frame me for retaliation, then filed immediate complaints to make herself look like the victim. but she'd made one crucial mistake. Years of electrical work had taught me about evidence documentation for insurance claims. Texas requires strict chain of custody and timeline documentation for criminal evidence. I called Sergeant Davis with my suspicions about manufactured evidence. "Bring in everything," he said, his voice carrying new interest. "If someone's staging property damage for false reports, we're talking conspiracy charges and obstruction of justice." That evening's neighborhood meeting had evolved from coffee complaints into amateur detective work. 12 residents gathered in my workshop, comparing notes like we were planning to storm the Bastille. "She's parked outside our house every morning this week," Tom Martinez reported, his voice tight with anger, "taking photos of our kids walking to school." "That crosses the line into stalking," Sarah Bellamy added. "Texas Penal Code defines surveillance and documentation of daily activities as criminal harassment." The room went dead quiet as we realized we'd crossed from dealing with an overzealous neighbor into something much darker. Friday evening, reviewing the week's evidence with Linda, she asked the question that had been haunting me. How far is she willing to go? Staring at photos of staged vandalism and documented false reports, I honestly didn't know. But Saturday morning's call from Sergeant Davis gave me a clue. "Mr. Thornfield, Mrs. Kellerman filed another report claiming you've escalated to threatening her family's physical safety. We need to meet immediately." Saturday afternoon, Sergeant Davis's desk looked like a crime scene. Patty's latest complaint spread across fake wood veneer under buzzing fluorescent lights that made everything feel like an interrogation. "She claims you've escalated to threatening her family's physical safety," Davis said, studying my reaction. "Says you cornered her husband and threatened to make them pay for interfering with your property." Sergeant, I've never met her husband. The guy's a ghost, travels constantly for work." "That's what I figured, but here's what caught my attention. Mrs. Kellerman's been filing all these reports from a business address, Community Standards Consulting LLC. That damn fake company again. I told you, it doesn't exist in state registry." Davis turned his computer monitor toward me, and what I saw made my retirement savings feel suddenly insecure. "Actually, it was incorporated 3 weeks ago. Retroactive paperwork. But look at this." Bank records filled the screen, months of transactions that made my electrician brain short-circuit. "Your HOA's been paying Community Standards Consulting $47,000 over 18 months for architectural compliance services and community standards enforcement." The words hit like voltage through wet hands. $47,000? Monthly payments from $1,800 to $4,200. All checks signed by Patricia Kellerman as both HOA president and treasurer. Davis scrolled through transaction after transaction. She's been writing checks to herself using a fake business entity. The room tilted sideways as everything clicked into place. Every harassment complaint, every frivolous city report, every midnight trespassing incident, all designed to distract from systematic theft of community funds. Jesus Christ, she's been robbing us blind while making us think we're the problem. Gets better. Financial Crimes ran the numbers. Your community dues are $245 monthly per household. That's roughly $372,000 annually from 127 homes. Where's the other money going? I felt sick thinking about Mrs. Patterson on her fixed income, carefully budgeting every month while unknowingly funding her harasser's lifestyle. "The harassment campaign was never about signs or compliance," Davis continued. "Target residents who might audit finances. Keep them busy defending themselves so they never ask about missing money." "What about the board members, Johnson, Williams, the others?" "Elderly retirees who trusted their HOA president to handle technical details. Classic embezzlement setup. Gain trust, assume multiple roles, eliminate oversight." Davis leaned forward. "Your neighbor turned community service into a criminal enterprise." The scope was staggering. Patty hadn't just stolen money. She'd weaponized municipal resources, corrupted community trust, and terrorized neighbors to cover her tracks. There's more. IRS criminal investigation flagged Community Standards Consulting for unreported income. She's been pocketing your HOA dues without paying federal taxes. Davis closed the file. "We're talking multiple felonies: embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, filing false police reports." Timeline for charges? Financial Crimes presents to grand jury within 2 weeks. Your neighbor's looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison plus full restitution and penalties. Walking to my truck, afternoon sunlight felt cleaner somehow, like discovering the truth had burned away months of confusion and frustration. Someone's weekend barbecue smelled like freedom mixed with the promise of justice. But driving home through our peaceful neighborhood, one terrifying thought kept circling. If Patty was desperate enough to steal from 127 families while terrorizing anyone who questioned her, what would she do when federal investigators started knocking on doors? Linda was waiting on our front porch when I pulled in, probably wondering why her husband kept having meetings at the police station. "Honey," I said, climbing our front steps with legs that felt like rubber, "call Mrs. Patterson and the Martinez family. We need an emergency neighborhood meeting." "What did you find out?" "Patty Kellerman's been stealing from every family in Maplewood Estates for over a year, and tomorrow, everyone's going to know." Sunday morning, my workshop transformed into mission control for suburban justice. 14 neighbors packed around my workbench, coffee growing cold, while evidence boxes turned our peaceful retirement hangout into something resembling a war room. "She stole $47,000. Mrs. Patterson kept repeating the number like a prayer, her voice shaking with each iteration, while threatening to fine me $300 for feeding birds. Linda had made the calls Saturday night, urgent but vague. Now, watching our neighbors process the scope of Patty's betrayal, I felt like a doctor delivering terminal cancer diagnosis to an entire family. Tom Martinez, whose accounting background made him our unofficial financial expert, studied the bank records with professional horror. "This is textbook embezzlement. She created a fake vendor, authorized payments to herself, and covered tracks with forged documentation. But how?" Johnson, our elderly treasurer, looked genuinely confused. "Our covenants require dual signatures for anything over $500. Linda spread photocopied board meeting minutes across my workbench, like evidence from a crime scene. March 2023 emergency meeting, supposedly authorizing single-signature spending during architectural compliance emergencies. Problem is, Johnson was hospitalized that week. Williams was in California visiting family. The workshop went silent, except for someone's lawnmower humming in the distance. Normal Sunday sounds that felt increasingly precious as we discussed federal crimes in suburbia. "She forged our signatures while I was recovering from surgery," Johnson whispered. "Said she'd handle the paperwork so I could focus on healing." But here's where my electrical background became invaluable. 30 years of dealing with insurance fraud claims had taught me about evidence preservation, something that would make or break our case. "We need professional financial forensics before this goes public," I said. "Tom, can you and Maria audit 3 years of HOA records?" "Already thinking about it. We'll need bank statements, canceled checks, vendor invoices, everything." Linda had anticipated this. "Requested complete financial records Friday from our bank and management company. Should arrive Tuesday." Sarah Bellamy leaned forward, her husband's municipal government experience showing. "Legal representation?" "My contractor association buddy Jake Brennan specializes in fraud referrals. Recommended Morrison and Associates. They handle HOA corruption cases on contingency. No recovery, no fees." But the media strategy required delicate timing. Sarah's husband knew Channel 7's investigative team, famous for exposing municipal corruption. "Media exposure before criminal charges could compromise prosecution," Sarah explained. "But after charges are filed, publicity helps other communities recognize similar fraud patterns." Mrs. Patterson looked worried. "Do we really need television people? This feels so public." Tom nodded grimly. "HOA embezzlement affects property values, municipal resources, and community trust. Public exposure prevents future victims." Linda had been thinking beyond immediate justice toward long-term healing. "People are traumatized. Mrs. Patterson, you've been psychologically abused for months while unknowingly funding your abuser. That's serious trauma requiring professional support." The room absorbed this reality. They weren't just theft victims, they were abuse survivors. "Community meetings, maybe counseling resources," added Maria Santos, whose children had been terrorized over sidewalk chalk art. "We'll need help processing this betrayal." But then Johnson asked the question that changed everything. What happens when Patty realizes we know? Afternoon sunlight streaming through my workshop windows suddenly felt ominous instead of warm. "Financial crimes investigation starts tomorrow," I said. "Federal agents interviewing board members, executing search warrants, freezing accounts. She'll know within hours." "Is she physically dangerous?" Mrs. Patterson's voice barely carried across the crowded workspace. I thought about midnight trespassing, staged property damage, systematic harassment campaigns, false police reports designed to destroy lives. She's facing 5 to 10 years in federal prison, I said. People do desperate things when they're cornered. Sarah stood up, decision crystallizing. We document everything, coordinate with authorities, support each other, and trust law enforcement. And we implement emergency financial controls immediately, Johnson added. Tuesday night board meeting, new banking procedures, dual signature requirements, complete transparency going forward. But Tom raised the concern that kept me awake nights. What if she tries to destroy evidence or flee? Federal agents are monitoring her accounts, I said. Flight risk protocols are already active. The meeting broke up with assignments. Tom and Maria handling financial forensics, Sarah coordinating media strategy, Linda organizing community support resources, Johnson preparing emergency board governance changes. Walking our neighbors to their cars that evening, the scent of barbecue smoke and freshly watered lawns felt fragile. Suburban peace we'd almost lost to organized crime disguised as community service. Back inside, Linda asked the question I'd been avoiding. What if she comes after us directly? Looking at our security camera monitors showing Patty's house dark and apparently empty, I honestly didn't know. But tomorrow morning, when federal agents started knocking on doors in Maplewood Estates, we'd find out exactly how far a desperate criminal would go to protect her stolen kingdom. We're about to find out, I said, double-checking our door locks for the first time since moving to suburbia. Monday morning, 6:23 a.m. 3 black SUVs rolled into our sleepy neighborhood like something from a crime drama, except this was real life and my coffee was getting cold while I watched federal agents and FBI windbreakers surround Patty's McMansion. The search warrant execution lasted 97 minutes. I counted every one while standing at my kitchen window, watching agents load evidence boxes like they were dismantling a drug cartel instead of investigating suburban embezzlement. Patty stood on her front lawn in a pink bathrobe, looking like someone had just explained that her entire world was ending, which, legally speaking, it was. That night changed everything. Tuesday evening, Linda called me inside from the workshop where I'd been stress building a birdhouse for Mrs. Patterson. You need to see this footage. Security cameras from Monday night showed Patty breaking into the community center at 11:47 p.m. with what looked like professional lock-picking tools. She spent 43 minutes inside the HOA office, and what she did made my electrician brain spark with recognition. She's feeding documents into the shredder, Linda whispered, watching Patty destroy evidence with methodical precision. But here's the mini twist that made everything terrifying. Our cameras also captured her loading multiple file boxes into her car trunk before destroying anything. Why take some files and shred others? Linda asked. Years of electrical work had taught me about evidence preservation for insurance claims. She's keeping documents that implicate other people while destroying proof of her own crimes. Classic criminal strategy. If she goes down, she takes everyone with her. Wednesday morning, Tom Martinez called with news that made breakfast taste like cardboard. The forensic audit's finished. Total embezzlement is $87,000 over 3 years. But here's the scary part. Bank records show she's been liquidating assets all week. Large cash withdrawals, closed accounts, even sold her jewelry collection. $87,000 stolen from neighbors who trusted her to protect their community investment while she planned her escape. Flight risk? I asked. Definitely. She's converting everything to untraceable cash. That afternoon, every doorstep in Maplewood Estates received a special delivery that made my vision blur with pure rage. Professional flyers with my photo taken through telephoto lens, headlines screaming, "Neighborhood terrorist targets families." The text painted me as a mentally unstable predator who'd threatened children's safety and organized criminal harassment against elected community leaders. Photos from my selective enforcement documentation were cropped to look sinister, with captions suggesting violent intentions. But Patty had made one critical mistake. The same microscopic printer identification dots that had traced her previous anonymous harassment were embedded in every flyer. Physical evidence linking her directly to witness intimidation. She's trying to destroy your credibility before her arrest becomes public, Linda said, studying the propaganda with disgust. Thursday night at 8:47 p.m., our doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a nervous man in an expensive suit that screamed "criminal defense attorney" louder than a legal billboard. "Mr. Thornfield?" I represent Mrs. Kellerman regarding your ongoing community disagreement. I kept the chain lock engaged, every instinct screaming danger. Mrs. Kellerman recognizes there may have been bookkeeping irregularities in HOA financial management, he continued smoothly. She's prepared to make full restitution plus significant compensation in exchange for your discretion regarding internal community matters. Translation: split the stolen money and help cover up federal crimes. Tell your client that federal agents don't negotiate through homeowners, I said. Have a blessed evening. After he left, I called Sergeant Davis immediately. That was attempted bribery, he confirmed. We'll add obstruction of justice to her charges. But Friday morning brought escalation that crossed every conceivable line. Linda was leaving for grocery shopping when she discovered her car vandalized, 4 slashed tires and threatening notes tucked under windshield wipers in handwriting that matched Patty's complaint documentation. Stop your husband's interference or face serious consequences for your family. The words made my hands shake with protective fury. Threatening my wife meant Patty had abandoned all pretense of civilized behavior. She's targeting Linda now, I told Sergeant Davis, pacing our living room like a caged animal. Pack overnight bags, he said grimly. We're arranging protective services until arraignment. Your neighbor's escalating toward potential violence against witnesses. That evening, loading suitcases while federal agents maintained surveillance outside our house, Linda asked the question haunting both of us. How did a dispute over a 6-inch sign turn into this? Looking at our peaceful neighborhood now crawling with law enforcement, I realized we'd uncovered something much darker than petty theft. Patty wasn't just an embezzler. She was someone willing to destroy innocent lives rather than accept responsibility for her crimes. Standing in our driveway under the watchful eyes of federal protection, suburban Texas felt like a war zone where the enemy looked like a soccer mom but fought like a cornered criminal. Tomorrow would bring public confrontation. Tonight, we were refugees from our own neighborhood. Saturday morning in the Hampton Inn, continental breakfast tasted like witness protection rations while Sergeant Davis delivered news that made my coffee cup rattle against the saucer. Your neighbor went full criminal overnight. Someone planted stolen property around your workshop and filed a police report claiming you're running a neighborhood theft ring. I set down my cup before I dropped it. What stolen property? Mrs. Patterson's ceramic garden gnome, the Martinez family's welcome mat, Sarah Bellamy's decorative flag. All items reported missing this week, all conveniently discovered near your tool shed by an anonymous concerned neighbor. But here's where my security system investment paid dividends that would make any prosecutor smile. An hour later, we're in the police conference room watching high-definition footage that played like a criminal instruction video. Thursday night, 2:23 a.m., Patty creeping across my property with a shopping bag, methodically placing stolen items around my workshop with the precision of someone who'd planned every detail. She's not just framing me, I said, watching her carefully position Mrs. Patterson's gnome for maximum visual impact. She's trying to destroy my credibility before testifying at her trial. But the mini twist that made everything click was captured on earlier footage. Security cameras from throughout the week showing Patty stealing those same items from her neighbors' properties. She'd systematically robbed her own community to create evidence against me. Federal evidence tampering charges, Davis said with satisfaction. This footage gives us conspiracy to obstruct justice. Meanwhile, FBI agent Patricia Wu had uncovered the psychological profile that explained Patty's increasingly desperate behavior. Financial forensics revealed a gambling addiction, Wu explained, spreading bank records across the conference table like a roadmap to destruction. Online casinos, sports betting, high-stakes poker games, she's lost over $90,000 in community funds feeding her compulsion. The numbers were staggering. Patty hadn't just embezzled, she'd gambled away nearly 4 years of neighborhood dues while terrorizing anyone who might audit the books. Gambling addicts become increasingly erratic as losses mount, Wu continued. When you started asking financial questions, her addiction brain perceived you as an existential threat to her supply. Sunday brought news that transformed our situation from criminal investigation to personal safety crisis. Tom Martinez called our hotel room with information that made protective custody feel inadequate. Garrett, Patty's husband, filed for emergency separation and took the kids to his mother's house. Says she's been making threats about permanent solutions if family members cooperate with federal investigators. She's threatening her own children? FBI thinks she's planning either flight or something more destructive. Her husband found internet searches for offshore banking and methods to eliminate witnesses. The weight of that phrase, eliminate witnesses, settled in my stomach like cold lead. Sunday evening, our neighborhood support network called with intelligence that confirmed our worst fears. Patty had been conducting surveillance throughout Maplewood Estates, photographing houses and documenting daily routines of families who'd supported our investigation. She's creating target lists, Sarah Bellamy reported during our emergency conference call. Everyone who attended planning meetings provided evidence or offered witness testimony. Agent Wu called our hotel directly Monday morning. Mr. Thornfield, we're accelerating the timeline. Public arraignment is Tuesday morning. We need community presence to demonstrate that witness intimidation won't work. Is that safe? She's escalating toward violence. That's exactly why public accountability matters. Criminals like Mrs. Kellerman control victims through fear and isolation. Community solidarity breaks that control. But Monday afternoon brought escalation that convinced me we were dealing with someone completely detached from reality. Mrs. Patterson called our hotel room, her voice shaking with terror that broke my heart. Garrett, dear, she tried to break into my house last night. My security alarm scared her off, but she left something horrible. What Patty had left was a manila envelope containing professional surveillance photos of Mrs. Patterson's daily activities, grocery shopping, church attendance, visiting her daughter, with handwritten notes about consequences for betraying community trust. She's stalking an 83-year-old woman who feeds birds, I told Agent Wu, my hands shaking with protective fury. Arrest warrant is active. We're treating this as domestic terrorism, using fear to control a community through systematic intimidation. But Tuesday morning's pre-arraignment briefing delivered news that changed everything. Mrs. Kellerman didn't report for federal custody, Agent Wu announced. Her house is empty, vehicle missing, approximately $60,000 in liquidated assets unaccounted for. My blood turned to ice water. She's running? Or planning something desperate? Federal manhunt is active, but she's had time to prepare. Sitting in that hotel room Tuesday morning, watching news reports about federal fugitive searches in suburban Texas, Linda asked the question haunting both of us. What if she comes back for revenge? Looking at our peaceful neighborhood now swarming with federal agents hunting a dangerous criminal, I realized our 6-inch trespassing sign had uncovered someone willing to destroy lives rather than accept consequences for her crimes. The public confrontation would happen with or without Patty present. But somewhere out there, a desperate criminal knew exactly where we lived. Tuesday morning, the Maplewood Estates Community Center looked like a federal crime scene mixed with a town hall meeting. News vans lined the parking lot while FBI agents in tactical gear maintained perimeter security. Inside, every chair was filled with 127 angry homeowners who'd just learned their trusted leader was a federal fugitive. I stood at the podium facing neighbors I'd lived beside for 3 years, many seeing me clearly for the first time since Patty's smear campaign had painted me as the neighborhood terrorist. 6 months ago, I nailed a 6-inch sign to my fence to stop teenagers from trampling my wife's herb garden, I began, my voice echoing through the packed room. Today, we're here because that sign led to uncovering the largest HOA embezzlement case in Texas history. The room buzzed with murmurs until I held up the financial forensics report that Tom and Maria Martinez had prepared. Patricia Kellerman stole $97,000 from this community over 3 years. She gambled away your dues money while filing 47 false complaints to distract from her crimes. Mrs. Patterson stood up in the front row, her voice shaking but determined. She threatened to fine me $300 for feeding birds while she was stealing thousands from my fixed income. The emotional dam burst. Neighbor after neighbor rose to share stories of harassment, intimidation, and financial abuse they'd endured while unknowingly funding their tormentor's gambling addiction. But then the community center doors burst open with a sound like thunder. Patty Kellerman strode in wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than most neighbors' monthly HOA dues, flanked by 2 expensive lawyers who looked like they specialized in defending white-collar criminals. "This is a witch hunt," she announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a chainsaw. "Garrett Thornfield has orchestrated a criminal conspiracy to frame me for his own financial mismanagement." The room exploded in angry shouts, but Patty wasn't finished with her delusional defense. "I have documentation proving that Mr. Thornfield embezzled community funds and planted evidence to cover his crimes." She waved a manila folder like it contained nuclear secrets. His obsessive harassment of community leadership stems from mental instability and financial desperation. Agent Wu stepped forward from the back of the room, badge visible, voice carrying federal authority. Mrs. Kellerman, you're under arrest for federal embezzlement, tax evasion, and witness tampering. I demand to address these false accusations publicly, Patty shrieked, her composure completely shattered. This community deserves to know the truth about this man's criminal behavior. That's when I delivered the mic-drop moment that 6 months of harassment had been building toward. The truth, Patty, I said, holding up bank records that federal agents had authorized for public disclosure. The truth is that you wrote 63 checks from our community account to your fake consulting company. The truth is that you gambled away 4 years of neighborhood dues money. The truth is that you threatened an 83-year-old woman for feeding birds while stealing her savings. I turned to face the packed room. The truth is that every single family in this room has been robbed by someone they trusted to protect their investment. The community erupted in unified fury that had been building for months. Voices shouting about harassment, about stolen money, about broken trust, about elderly neighbors terrorized on fixed incomes. Patty's lawyers tried to restrain her, but she broke free and pointed directly at me with shaking hands. He's destroyed this community. His mental illness has corrupted everyone against legitimate leadership. Legitimate leadership? Mrs. Patterson struggled to her feet, supported by her neighbor. You stole my money while threatening to fine me for bird feeders. You planted evidence on my property, I added, security footage now displayed on the community center's projection screen. Federal agents have video of you stealing from neighbors to frame me. The room watched in stunned silence as high-definition footage showed Patty systematically stealing items from various properties, then planting them around my workshop in the dead of night. That video is fabricated, she screamed as federal agents moved toward her. This is a conspiracy to destroy community standards. Mayor Richardson, who'd been observing from the side, stepped forward with the authority of elected office. Mrs. Kellerman, this community has witnessed systematic financial crimes and witness intimidation. Federal law enforcement has presented overwhelming evidence of your criminal behavior. Agent Wu approached with handcuffs while Patty's lawyers stepped aside, clearly recognizing a lost cause. Patricia Kellerman, you're under federal arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy, tax evasion, and witness tampering. You have the right to remain silent. As federal agents escorted a screaming Patty from the community center, the room erupted in applause that felt like thunder after a storm. But the real victory came when Johnson, our elderly board treasurer, stood up with tears in his eyes. Garrett, this community owes you an apology and a debt of gratitude. Your courage saved us from years more theft and abuse. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for exposing crime. It was for proving that ordinary people could stand up to corruption and win. Outside, news cameras captured Patty being loaded into a federal vehicle, while 127 homeowners watched their former tormentor finally face justice. 6 months later, justice tastes like fresh coffee on a peaceful Tuesday morning without the threat of frivolous citations or midnight trespassing incidents. Patty pleaded guilty to avoid federal trial and received 4 years in federal prison, plus full restitution of $127,000, including penalties and interest. Her fake consulting business was dissolved, professional licenses permanently revoked, and civil lawsuits recovered additional damages that restored our community's financial stability. The transformation of Maplewood Estates has been nothing short of miraculous. Our new HOA leadership, elected with overwhelming community support, implemented radical transparency measures. Monthly financial reports are published online with full bank statements. Every expenditure over $500 requires dual signatures and board approval. Most importantly, we established an independent audit committee that reviews all financial activity quarterly. The best part? Our monthly dues dropped to $180 after eliminating Patty's fraudulent consulting fees. That extra $65 per household funded community improvements we'd been told we couldn't afford for years. Mrs. Patterson's bird feeding station is now an officially designated community wildlife habitat, complete with educational plaques funded by recovered embezzlement money. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The woman threatened with fines for excessive bird feeders now manages our neighborhood conservation project. My workshop has become an unofficial community resource center where neighbors learn about HOA financial oversight, document preservation, and recognizing signs of institutional fraud. Linda started a support group for harassment victims that meets monthly, helping people process the psychological damage from systematic intimidation. But the most meaningful transformation is personal. My vegetable garden has expanded into a community food bank supply operation. Every Saturday morning, neighbors harvest fresh produce that gets delivered to 3 local food pantries. What started as retirement hobby farming became a neighborhood mission feeding families throughout Collin County. The ripple effects extend far beyond our community borders. Our story catalyzed statewide HOA reform legislation requiring stricter financial oversight, mandatory auditing procedures, and criminal penalties for filing false municipal complaints. I've testified before the Texas legislature about homeowner protection laws and spoken at community association conferences across the Southwest. The Channel 7 investigative series about our case went viral nationally, inspiring other communities to audit their own HOA finances. To date, our story has helped expose embezzlement in 12 other Texas communities, recovering over $400,000 in stolen homeowner funds. Most importantly, the annual Maplewood Unity Festival celebrates our community's resilience and commitment to transparency. This year's festival raised $15,000 for college scholarships awarded to local students pursuing careers in public service, law enforcement, or financial accountability. Local businesses sponsor booths featuring educational materials about community governance, financial oversight, and civic engagement. Children's activities include a Community Heroes program recognizing neighbors who demonstrate courage, integrity, and service to others. But the festival's highlight is the Transparency Wall, where community members share stories about overcoming corruption, supporting vulnerable neighbors, and building stronger civic institutions. Mrs. Patterson's story about feeding birds despite harassment threats has become legendary among visiting families. Property values have actually increased 8% since establishing honest leadership and transparent governance. Prospective buyers specifically mention our community's reputation for financial integrity and neighbor solidarity when making purchase decisions. My daily routine now includes morning coffee without fear of harassment, afternoon workshop projects that benefit community members, and evening walks through neighborhoods where children play safely without worrying about unstable authority figures. The 6-inch trespassing sign still hangs on my fence, but now it represents something different, proof that ordinary people can expose corruption and restore community trust through persistence, documentation, and collective action. Linda often reminds me that our fight was never really about property signs or HOA compliance. It was about the fundamental right to live peacefully in your own home without fear of retaliation from people who abuse positions of trust. As I finish this story, Sarah Bellamy just called with news that another community in Austin has contacted her about suspicious HOA financial activity. Their president has been filing excessive municipal complaints against questioning homeowners while billing for mysterious consulting services. Sound familiar? I told Sarah to give them my number. Because here's what I've learned. Corruption thrives in darkness and dies in sunlight. Communities have more power than they realize when they stand together against those who exploit positions of trust. Share your craziest HOA nightmare in the comments below. You're not alone, and there's always hope for justice. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories proving that sometimes the little guy really does win against impossible odds. Next week, how one teacher exposed $1 million school board scandal by questioning why textbooks cost more than cars.